Sorry for the delay, guys. I'm amazed that has not happened before. I had internet all morning, and at 1 o'clock it went down, right on the dot.
Yeah, that's just unlucky.
You know, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. There's no special teacher magic. My internet is as, you know, reliable and not reliable as everybody else's. So I feel kind of lucky we got through most of the semester with no interruption. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me make sure that I've got everybody. It looks like everybody's here. Taking some quick attendance. Okay, I want to head to the handout quickly. We lost a precious 8 minutes, and again, I apologize for anybody who just got in. The fault was not on your end; it was on mine. Strange, but all of a sudden nothing would work. I had to restart the modem. All right, here we are. I'm going to go right to screen sharing because I want to give us a clear understanding of what's happening for the rest of the semester. So I'm going to screen share. Let's have a look. All right. So we have 3 classes after today, right? And that gives me a little bit of wiggle room about how I want to treat it. So I want to tell you what I mean by that. Today, we're going to discuss what the final is. We're going to do a warm-up exercise so people feel more confident in it. It is going to be more kinetic type. We did that once before, and it looked like, most of you guys enjoyed it, which is good. So that hopefully that will transfer into an enjoyable final if there's such a thing. So today we're going to go over both the techniques, just about the same techniques as we did when we animated type last time. If anyone happened to have missed it and didn't watch the YouTube video, first I wag my finger and then I say, well, you're okay, because we're going to go over it today. We're going to also go over all the details. Thursday, we're going to dive into the final as a group. So we're actually going to start it in the class. And it's not due till the 10th, which is the official last day of the class. So today's a warm-up, preparation. You'll know what the deal is. Get your confidence up. Thursday, we're going to dive in as a group. Then you'll have an entire week to finish it on your own. And I'll tell you what we're going to do in the interim as we arrive there, right? All right, so these are the dates. Do your best to not miss any of them. All the videos are online, and today's will be online. I intend for them all to be online. Tutoring still available. I want to mention that I just checked today for any late homework that I didn't see the last time I graded, which was, a good 2 weeks back. So anyone who had work in there, all the work in there is graded. Now that brings me to a really important topic, and I want to make sure that everybody's with it at this late date in the semester. Today, go to Blackboard and check the weighted average column. Now, the weighted average column considers that I'm not treating, say, the midterm as equal value to the week 4 assignment. Week 4, you made a really easy web page kind of project. It was the first homework. It was very, very light. So naturally, that's not going to weigh the same as the midterm. So if you take a look at the weighted average, you could figure out how you're doing so far. Now, this class is primarily a 4-project semester in terms of homework. 2 or 3 kind of large, one's really small, right? And that's the whole semester. So if you miss even one, it takes your grade down. I want you to think about this. If you got 3 of them in and they all got 100, and you skipped one and it got a 0, then you just have to divide 300 by 4 to get a rough idea. And it's not fabulous. So it's best not to skip any homeworks. So if any of you don't like your grade, it's likely that that's what it's about. It's about skipped homework. So I want to say a little bit about that. Some of you got in work the last couple of weeks, so you'll be glad to see that your work has been graded. So you're going to look. It's the weighted average that lets you know how it's going to go. And please keep in mind, there's one more homework. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's going to be roughly 25% of the final grade. And that's the one we're going to, prepare today. I want to say something about late work at this late date. I'm still accepting late work, right? So if you have late work for me, you're going to open up the drive, and I'm going to do that right now because I want you to see something. Turns out I already had it open. Here we go. Right. So this is the way our drive looks now. The final projects are just going to be loose. You're just going to drop them in. Now, I don't want anybody, please listen, guys, because really, I'm not going to look in every folder for my entire semester, you know? So that's why I have a late work folder. So these have been graded. Looks like I just got another one, which I don't remember off the top of my head whether I graded it or not. And Jonathan could check Blackboard. I'll take a look in here, of course. So what I'm trying to say is I'm going to check the late work folder repeatedly for the rest of the semester, but I'm not going to check any of the other ones. Well, I'll check revisions. So revisions, no one's used yet. It's like you didn't like a grade, but you did the homework. You want to give me a new version. No one's used that yet. These three are closed. Don't use these folders, please. Okay. So you interrupt me anytime you want, right? If you have a question about any of this. Now, look, I don't want to talk to individuals in here, right? But like some of you are real late on homework. Most of you are not, or completely up to date. I have to say it's been a particularly successful semester, even with COVID. There's 2 or 3 people in the class whose grades are in great danger. They'd be wise to look. They've been homework negligent. I'd say 3 people. You know who you are. You know, look, if you've done no homework, you better email me and make an appeal. I'm not, you know, if someone's giving me all the homework at once, I'm not likely to accept it at this late date, right? So I'm talking about, you missed the video, right? That was class 19, right? That's the one that the most people missed, was class 19 video. By the way, the video from class 19 is still on YouTube. You know, you can watch it to remind how to do it. If there's some grave reason why you cannot do that one specific homework, write me a convincing email and I may come up with an alternative project for you. You know, since we don't have access to the school labs, you know, if you have a problem with Premiere, just don't leave it there, right? If you skipped one for some good reason, please email me. Which brings me back to this topic. Please use this email address, right? Those of you who use it often know that I get back to you. In my BMCC email, I will get back to you there too, but much later, because you're going to be in there with 100 other emails. So when I get to it, I'll get to it. But this is my hotline. All right. So anyway, I am accepting late work. All right. We're in Zoom. All right. The rest of this semester is Adobe Animate, except for one possibility. So I want to say something to you. You know, somehow in the middle of this, we've gone really smoothly. And, you know, as a group, we're not only on time, we're a dash ahead. So if we actually finish the final early, I'm going to probably include a little of Adobe Illustrator, which, you know, frankly, I've been teaching for many, many years. So I'm very experienced at it. And I think a lot of you would really be interested in it. We'll see how this plays out. I got a little bit of wiggle room. We're going to start the final together, as I said. So we'll know how well it went. If I need to use 2 classes for that, I'm cool with it. So we'll see exactly how the last week plays out. I want to mention quickly this exam week business. I don't know how many of you are aware of exam week. Some people have called it reading week, and it's a little vague, you know. I mean, the idea is, you know, that you do exams that week. You know, the lessons are done. It's just exams. That doesn't really work for a class like this, though. You know, it's not. We don't do exams precisely, right? So often on exam week, I have an optional attendance date where I'll do stuff that's relevant to the group, and I have a number of options that I sometimes cover. Sometimes I talk about how to deal with the internet in terms of getting your own web address and who should you hire to do that, and in terms of paying a host, or how do you get your own domain names, your fancy web addresses. Sometimes I do more Illustrator. We could talk more about that when we're deeper in, right? So in short, these are required dates. I'll let you know if there's an optional date after that. There might be one more. So our current goal is Adobe Animate, right? That's the goal, right? Going to spend a couple classes more on it, and then we'll see what happens after that. Does anybody have any questions for me? Don't be shy about it, please. I think by now you're all used to me. No one's that shy around me anymore. I'll only take a quick peek at the chats just in case I'm missing something. A minute. Nothing today. All right, that's fine. So listen, let me tell you what's going to happen. We're going to go over from the ground up how to use Adobe Animate for Kinetic Type. The final project is Kinetic Type, sometimes called Kinetic Text. Not a big difference there, right? We're talking about moving words. Now, if you remember, when we did it last time, we did a piece quote. Piece is always beautiful, actually, was what we did. And we had the word piece slide in, piece. And remember, it faded in too. It was transparent, it slid in and faded in. And then it said is always moved as a unit, right? What I was calling a block. Quickly, who really wants to see the word is move by itself? It's not that important, right? So usually try to tag it on with something. So piece is always beautiful came in last. So that's the idea. Now I do want to say something though. There is kind of a lot of room on the final. Like let's say you struggled with that, or you're going to struggle with what we do today. I have the easiest option available for someone who finds it extra difficult, and they could still get a respectable grade. On the other hand, if you find what I'm doing is too easy for you, you're like, come on, let me out of the cage already. I got to run. I've got bigger, harder versions. I want to give you a peek about what I'm talking about before we dive in. So I'm skipping ahead just for a moment because I just want you to notice something. 3C here is asking you to pick a quote for the final project. Now, we're not going to work on this quote today, right? Because we're warming up today, but I just want you to see what I have. Peace is its own reward. Dash Mahatma Gandhi, right? That's very short. I do want you to include the person you're quoting. That's the shortest. And if it's done beautifully, it could get an A. If it's done middle of the road, well, it's short and middle of the road. Wouldn't fetch the highest grade, right? But if it was beautiful, it could. You notice how number 2 is longer? Do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Let's be blunt. The more words, the harder it is. You know, you could still do that all on one page. You know, like I would probably say, do not let the behavior deserves a big spot. Behavior, of others, disturb your inner peace. So I'd have to break it down first and what kind of lines make sense. But I have to say, some people, hear this out, this idea. Some people would prefer to go this road. Do not let the behavior of others finish itself. Let that whole thing fade out, right? And then start with destroy your inner peace. In a sense, you're treating it like 2 entirely separate units of animation. That would be harder. I see some of you guys smiling. You're like, yep, that's me. I'm going to do that. Your choice. It's significantly harder. I know we got a bunch of animation majors in here, so it would make particular sense for them to try it. But there's 2 more choices that are even longer. If you cannot find peace within yourself, you'll never find it anywhere else. So again, this could be done on one page very simply, or it could, I'm calling it a page, maybe a better term would be scene, or it could be broken down. But I'd like you to notice the longest one. Few people take this one on, right? And you notice it's actually the only one that's multiple sentences. 1, 2, 3, 4 whole sentences. One could make each one a separate event. It isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it. And it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. Eleanor Roosevelt, which would be an extra line. So this is what I'd like to suggest to everybody. Today we're going to warm up on something very, very simple, right? About as simple as the thing we did last time, because I'm going to split the time between talking about the final and just warming up. Thursday, I'm going to ask you to actually pick, right? And I'm going to help, but it would be advisable for you to actually start working right in the class on the final. And this way you'll have questions related directly to what we're going to do. Do you guys have a rough idea where we're headed? Am I making sense? I'm good? All right, great. All right, this here breakdown, I got to admit, once it goes into every single step, this only helps if you're going to actually treat it that way, follow it like an instruction list. Right now, I'm going to do it more conversationally, as I always do, but I'm going to use just about the exact same steps. I just want to mention a last little bit, right? Well, obviously we have time, so no one needs to like take big notes about this one. But you're going to submit a GIF animation because there's no sound, or a SWIF, which is very easy to make. I'll go over both those things. And you're going to submit them according to these instructions, right, which are really rather simple. So you're going to go into the shared Google Drive and just drop it in there when you're done. It's not due till the 10th. Today's only the 1st. Happy December, everybody. All right, let's get started. So what we're going to do is I just going to make up a simple quote, right? I don't want to get complicated about this, right? So I'm going to make believe it's like a toast. Here's to peace in 2021, right? I mean that very sincerely. Here's to some people, man, because 2020 was not very peaceful. But anyway, let's get back to animation together. All right, so if everybody would open Animate. I got an extra little warning there, no big deal. You could either use Create New or File Menu New. And I'm going to go with the one they call standard. Well, we got used to this size, 640 by 480. I do want to say for the record, though, that if anyone feels cramped by that, when you're ready for the final, I'll let you choose any of their 3 top recommended sizes. This one is pretty good. I use this often. It's nearly twice the size. It gives you a lot of room, but it isn't so huge that it's going to be hard to work on. Full HD here is almost 2,000 pixels wide. It's big. It's going to make it hard to work on. So right now I'm going to suggest standard. Please check your frame rate though. I'm really insistent that 24 frames per second is your best bet. And let's click create. All right. Strangely, the way you typically do it is you start by laying out what it's going to look like at the end. Now you got to hear me out on this. That's assuming that all the words are going to stay on screen. So there's a very clear, this is the end. Here's to peace in 2021. It's short enough. I want it all there. So at the end, it's going to look like a poster. So we're going to actually design the end first. I want to say something to those of you who are more ambitious and want to go with like a sentence model where one leaves and the next one leaves, and at the end, I'm left with the final conclusion, right? That's going to be pretty much on you. Like I'm open to answering questions, maybe Thursday, who knows, maybe next week even, once you got it off the ground. I'm very open to it. But we're not going to do it as a group necessarily. So step 1 then is to get the type tool. Now, listen, guys, don't do this, okay? I'm just doing this to help refer to it. So please don't do what I'm doing here, right? I just want to write something down for you. Give me a minute. So this is the text that I just wrote there, but I don't want you to put it in one box because that would break everything. Usually you'll write it down on a piece of paper, but we're in Zoom, right? So I'm just leaving that box there as a reference. The first question someone always asks is, how many blocks do I need? For example, if I did here's, that's a weird word by itself, isn't it? Here's, here's to, we know it's a toast. Here's to you, So I'm going to put those 2 words together. Peace is the most important word on the page. So I'm going to make it its own block. And at the end, I'm going to do in 2021 as another block. By the way, there's an infinite number of ways to do it. So this is just today's suggestion. All right. So I'd like you to get your type tool. And I want you to click on screen, on the stage, once. Now listen, guys, last time I said nobody skipped this, and somebody did. So I want to point something out. Don't do this. See, when you drag a box, you're telling it you want a width of a column. You know, like you're going to write a whole article from the newspaper, and this is the width of the column. So you really don't want to do that. It's just not good for animation. So if you had a box there, just Command Z. I want you to just click. Don't make a box, just click. Now, you're going to write, here's 2. And, you know, it's up to you. Do you want all capital letters? Hang on a second here. I know that's hard to see. Just give me a minute to do this a little bit differently. So it's up to you. Do you want all caps? Do you want lowercase letters? Notice what I'm doing, right? So I'm not even sure that I like that.
Wait, what do we not do?
This is what you don't do. I'm glad you asked. Don't take the type tool and drag a box. Right? Because this is thinking you're going to write an article. Look at the way it behaves. You see how it keeps going down a line? When you drag a box, you're telling it how wide you want it to be. And we don't know that, and it's not good for animating words. So instead, don't drag, just click.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, glad you asked, though.
How do I make it smaller?
We're going to do that in a minute. Absolutely. So what I would like you to do, though, is think about whether you want capital letters or not. There's so many choices. Sloppy typist. All right. Now about changing the size. There's 2 ways you can do it. I would start with the black arrow, and then notice if it highlighted with a blue box. If it didn't, just click on it with the black arrow. Size and almost everything to do with typography is on the right, on the properties palette. Now this is one way. You click on the current size and drag your mouse. I love this particular method. So for this phrase, I'm going to do it this way, and I want to show you the other way on the next phrase. Now, I do want to mention something quickly, though. I think I made one mistake already, and it's not too late to fix it. It'll be easier to make good color choices if we choose a color background now. Now, remember, we're warming up. On the final, some of you are going to want to bring in a photo for the background or artwork. For now, I just want a flat color. So let's go ahead and choose that. So what I'd like you to do is, I'm sorry, we should have done this first, but it's not a big deal. Deselect the text. I got my black arrow, so I'm going to just click off of it. Take a look on the properties palette. You should see stage with a white box. Click on it. Now look, you know this is a peace phrase, so I'm not sure you're going to want to go with black. You know, what feels peaceful to you, right? I don't know. So you're going to pick something. Now, the text that you just wrote might not go well with it. So if you do want to change the color of your text now, click on it with the black arrow. Hang on a second there. And come to the fill box on the property palette. All right. So can I just redo? Best first step, set a background color. You know, just do it first. Get it out of the way. Because you're not going to like any of your colors if you drop a background in later. You know, it's kind of like you already have furniture and you want to paint the room and now you have to deal with your orange furniture. You know? So, all right. Then I'd like you to get the type tool again. Now, I want to warn you about this. I'm going to do just the word peace. But if I click too close to this one, it's going to think I'm adding it to that block. So I'm going to go a little extra low and click. I'm going to go with capital letters because it's an important word. And I'm going to switch to the black arrow. Now, I want to say something about the size of that. And we'll go back and choose fonts in a minute. You know, I'm sorry, guys. I think my brain is starting to fade out at the end of the semester. I like to be very neat. But this is good, but not as neat as I'd like. I want to talk about sizing that, though. So you already know you can size it this way. You click it with the black arrow, you come over here where it says the current size, you press drag to the right or the left. But there's some limits. Like you'll notice, it won't go over 96 points. What if I want this word to be really big? Well, I want to show you my favorite way. There's two ways, by the way, but I want to show you my favorite. My favorite way is to not use the properties palette at all. It's to come over here on the toolbar and choose this second tool. It's called Free Transform. You could press the letter Q to get to it quickly. Now, the only thing about this is it will let you freely transform the size of it, but it worries me that people are going to distort the text like that. If you like this tool, I'm going to ask you to hold down Shift the entire time you use it. And this way the text won't distort. It'll stay nice and clean, but you can get it whatever size you want. Now, I skipped the fonts, and I have a motive for that. We might use two. So I'd rather have the words down so we could, think through how many fonts we actually want. So let's finish that last line. Let's get the type tool again. Stay away from these two so you don't accidentally add text to those blocks. Come a little further down and just click. And I'm going to write in 2021. And I'm going to switch to the black arrow. Now, you got a choice, right? If you want to change the size of that, you could do it the original way, but I'm at 96 points, so I could only go smaller this way. If I want it to be bigger, I'm going to go back to the transform tool. I just want to repeat, you should keep Shift down when you're scaling with the transform tool. So I'm going to actually make this as big as the word piece. It's a very common graphic design trick. They might be completely different font sizes, but they're the same width. I'll let this one be smaller. Thing is, I may need to change those sizes if I choose different fonts. I was using Animate this morning and I happened to be using this font. So I sort of got lucky it showed up with something nice. Let's go over how to change fonts and let's make one decision. I am perfectly okay with you choosing one good font for the whole project. But it is a creative opportunity to use more than one. So designers never agree on this, but I'll generally tell a student, don't use more than two, or maybe three at most for any project. And I'm talking even like a huge poster. Because it looks like you couldn't make up your mind. It doesn't look exciting. It just looks confused, right? So if I was looking at this and I thought, do I want more than one font? The word most likely to be different is, come on, somebody. Well, you all know. I wouldn't change the word in and give it a font, right? I'm going to go with the word piece, right? I mean, that's the big word here. So if you do want to change a font, that might be the best one. So you click on it. Now look, I realize you guys are a step behind me because I started with a nice font by luck, right? So I'm going to do it on the word piece. I'll give you time to do it on all three. About changing fonts. You click it once with the black arrow and you come over to the properties palette. One could click the current font and just check them out one by one. Ooh, that's a nice one. Or one could highlight the current font and use the down arrow on the keyboard to just see what a lot of fonts look like. So I have a couple good choices here. I'm a little afraid of thin text when I'm going to animate because they're a little harder to see while they're moving. But I might use this. I do like it. You'll see a lot of good choices. By the way, if the arrow trick doesn't work for you, sometimes it just gets stuck. Come back to the menu. The other thing I'd like to point out is they do have samples on the right. They're just very small and hard to see. you know, so I could just choose that way. Just look at the right on the menu. It scrolls, and we don't have the same font, so you have to see what's available on your computer. This looks like a diner or Greek ruin. All right, so however you do it, I'd like you to set up those 3 rows with a font. So I do want to point out that I really don't think it's a great idea to make them all different fonts. Maybe one staple font that anchors the whole project and one other font for special moments. You might discover you need to change your size again. Or maybe at this point you have a different feeling about color. So I'd like you to take a minute or two to review your sizes to see if you still like the way it looks. And then take a minute or two to review your colors. One thing that's pretty darn annoying is sometimes when the boxes overlap even a little, you can't select the one you want. If you keep selecting the wrong one, you'll have to move it out of the way for a minute or two. Work with the one you want and then move the other one back. Mine's got troubles because if you look at the words here too, piece, the box overlaps it. So if I have a hard time selecting it, it looks like I'm okay. I'd have to move one of them out of the way. All right, I'm going to rethink my colors for a minute. And I think I'm going to go with this. I want to add a little bit because this stage, while it's simple, is the most important. If you don't have a final look that you like, the whole animation to get there is going to wind up being very disappointing, right? So that last frame is critical, and you're thinking like a graphic designer right now, just to make it look good, feel right in some way, right? Okay, I do want to add though, that if you took your black arrow and dragged over all the text, you could move them around as a unit. You could even use the transform tool to change the size as a unit. So you can work on the whole thing. You could select it either with the black arrow or with the free transform tool. That's this tool here, the one that you press Q to get. Just select the whole thing and you could move it around or change its size as a group. Okay, I think we better save, right? So I'm going to ask you to save it anywhere that makes sense to you, right? So I'm going to do File Menu, Save. And I'm going to call this piece, and I'm going to name it after today's date, 12-1-20. And I think I'm just going to drop mine on the desktop because I'm in the habit of doing that, and I'll choose where I want to keep it later. You could name it anything that makes sense to you. This is not the final project. This is the warm-up. By the way, just quick advice, save a lot. You know, the end of the semester is the worst time to lose a file because your power went out after 3 hours of working. If you're saving every few minutes, you don't have to worry about that. You could go back and open it again. So just save, keep saving. Right. All right, now guys, this is an Adobe Animate moment for sure. The kind of animation we're using is called classic tweening. And classic tweening, as you could judge by the name classic, has been around for a long time and it's very powerful. But it likes working on images that have been converted into symbols. Now we did this, but it was over a week ago. So creating a symbol, we want what's called a graphic symbol, and it's going to live in the library. I'd like you to join me on this next step. I want you to click your first block. Make sure you're getting the one you think you're getting. Then I want you to control click if you're on a Mac or right click if you're on Windows so this menu shows up. Control click on Macs or right click on Windows. Notice how the very bottom, almost the very bottom, says convert to symbol. That's the one you want. So choose the block you want with one click, then go convert to symbol. This window opens, and under type, just check that it says graphic, because there are two other kinds. And I'd like you to change the name. I'm calling this Here's Two. And I'm going to click OK. So I want you to make one graphic symbol out of one of your blocks and check the library before we do the rest. Now the library's on the right. The properties palette is right next to another tab called library. If any of these palettes disappear, you go to the window menu and they're all here. So there it is, it says Here's Two, I'm good. So I'm going to go to the next one and I'm going to control click it. I'm going to say convert to symbol. And I'm going to name it Peace. And it's a graphic symbol already. I just simply click OK. Two of them in the library now. I'm going to do the last block, same exact way. I'm going to control click it or right click it. Get this menu and choose convert to symbol. Don't choose convert to bitmap. Convert to symbol. Same thing. I'm going to name it after itself in 2021. And I'm going to click OK. Then you want to check that they're all in the library. I want to stop for a minute because we're doing this on faith. I've done a lot of this, but I want to be very clear. There's 4 or 5 ways to make things move in Adobe Animate. Anyone who's going to take animation with me next semester is going to be exposed to about 4 different ways to do this. I find classic tweening excellent for text, but classic tweening requires this step. You made a symbol out of each block. Give me a minute. I use the word block because I wouldn't want to make a symbol out of the word in. It would have to move by itself and it would need its own layer. And it would be ugly, right? If it wasn't ugly, I wouldn't mind so much, right? So I'm choosing those blocks early in the first step, and now I'm just making each one into a symbol. How is everybody okay? So we designed it, we made symbols, and now we need to prepare our layers. Adobe Animate does a great job of putting everything on a layer for you. And I want to be really clear. This is the way animation works. If you use tweening of any sort, you're going to ask the computer to help things move. Each major actor needs its own layer. The only time that rule isn't true is if you're going to draw everything by hand. So then you can stick on one layer and more power to you, because that'll drive you insane. Most of us. It's exhausting. All right, let's get ready. So what we need to do now is select it all. I don't need this on the left anymore. I'm going to delete that. So you want to select all the stuff that's on stage. You could use your black arrow or the transform tool and just drag over it. Some of you guys know Command A. In this case, that would also work because there's nothing else. There's just the main actors here. All right, be sure that they're all selected because the next step is critical. Easy, but critical. If they're all selected, I want you to go up to the menus on the top of Animate. The first menus are familiar, File, Edit, that type of thing. You want to go to the one called Modify. Now, this is on today's handout, but I do want to say to those of you who take notes, everybody forgets this one. Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. And that's going to take the blocks you just carefully made and give them each their own layer. Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. So you selected the objects you wanted distributed. And now if you look down at the layers, you'll see you got a layer for everything there. I have one at the bottom, I got to figure out what that is. Now, before we go further, though, I just want to spend a second on helping you get more comfortable. Because some of you have very tiny monitors and some have huge monitors. And we want to make sure you could see the entire stage as well as all your layers. So let's do a couple quick things. If you look at my mouse, it may be a little hard to see. I'm going to the top edge of the timeline where all the layers live. I get a double arrow. I could actually move that up or down anytime I want. You just want to make sure that you see all your layers. It may take a minute to find that, right? You got to get right along this top edge of the timeline. And you could press and drag it however you like. After you do that, we want to rearrange the stage to make sure you could see that. Often, I'm going to start up here in the upper right. So I already fixed the layers, and now I'm going to the upper right where it says align 100%. And I could use this arrow to say, show me the frame. Or I could say, show all if I had stuff waiting. I'm going to suggest you choose show frame and then use the smaller arrows to back up. A quick word to everybody. Always make sure you can see the whole stage. I mean, if you were working with real actors, right, you wouldn't want a column in front of you so you can't see what Romeo's saying to Juliet. You know, it would kind of ruin the whole play, wouldn't it? Right? So make sure you could see the entire stage. So you need your layers and the stage. Any questions? Remember, if I don't see you, because when I get busy, I don't actually look at your faces. I'm kind of looking right at Animate. Just turn on your mic and get my attention. Oh, I see I got a chat there. Yeah, Diamond, I select, anytime I want a menu, I select the correct thing, and I right click if I've got that kind of mouse.
Oh no, I was helping somebody, but I want to know, do you need another layer, like layer 1 where it says?
No, I'm about to get rid of that one. Good question, though. So I want to point out what Diamond was, I want to emphasize what Diamond was pointing out. Could you take a look at your layers? You notice how several of them have black dots, but not all of them? So the ones with black dots have artwork in them. Those are good. The one that has a hollow dot, probably says layer 1 on it, is empty because you distributed everything from layer 1 to their own layers and you left layer 1 empty. So let's delete it. We're going to click right on layer 1 in the timeline. It's got a tiny trash can above it. Just click it once. I want to see what is going on here in my lowest layer. Oh, look, there's a little bit of residue, something I didn't even see. I'm going to delete that layer too. I should only have 3 layers. It's a good question. All right, if you could see your layers, you threw out any that were empty, right? I would like you to reorganize them though, so that their layer order makes more sense. I want to show you what I mean. Mine says in 2021, peace, here's to. I don't know about you, but that confuses the hell out of me. So I'm going to take the layer I want on top, press right on it, and drag it up. Here's 2. I'm going to take the next layer in order, that would be peace, and I'm going to drag it up in between the 2. So this imitates what I see on stage. For the record though, you could animate in your layers in any order, you'd probably be okay, but it would be very confusing. So I like to stack them the same way I designed the text. I think it's a good time to save again. So I'm just going to do File menu, Save, or Command S. I already gave it a name. I already gave it a home. So it'll only take a minute or a second. All right. So now we got the layout. We got our symbols. We got our layers, right? We've cleaned up after ourselves. We even have everything organized nicely so we can see them easily. We're ready to get busy working with time. So one of the things I like to do is I like to take a beginning guess at how much time I think it actually needs. Now this is incredibly short. 2 seconds might actually be enough. And I could always add more time later, take away time later, right? But I could start with 2 seconds. Let's go up to 3 seconds though, just to give ourselves a little bit of room. So how do you do it? If you look at the timeline, you'll see little frame numbers. And every time you hit 24, which is your frame rate, you'll see a mark above it that says 1s, 1 second. If you scroll over, and if you're on a touchpad, you could just put your fingers on the touchpad and move it. But everyone's got this little scroll bar at the bottom of the timeline. You could move over, and you'll see when you get to 3 seconds, that's frame 72. So I just want to stop for a minute just for a concept. When an animator says, I'm running at 24 frames a second, the simplest way to see that is 24 drawings per second. Now we're using tweening, so that wouldn't be accurate. That means the computer's going to help with a lot of the stuff in the middle. But if you were drawing everything, you'd really care, because people often set their animation to 30 frames a second, and they have to do 6 drawings extra for every second. Think about what that's going to do to you in an hour-long project. Days and days. And I personally don't think it looks better. All right. What I'd like you to do is go to frame 72, and I want you to try F5 with me. So the top row of keys are your F keys, and a lot of us need to hold down Fn. Like on my laptop, F5 just brightens my screen. So I have to find the Fn key, that's the function key, and I have to hold it down and just tap F5. So I'm going to do that for each layer. I just want to repeat though, we don't all need the function key. It really depends on your computer. The function key has an Fn on it, and this is what it means. It means ignore what my computer wants you to do. Function the way the program wants you to do. So my computer wants to brighten my screen with F5, but Animate wants to use filler frames. So I'm going to hold down my function key. I'm going to click in here, hold down function, tap F5. I'm going to do that for every row. So now they all live for 3 seconds. If I hadn't done that, I'm going to lose a word by the end of the movie. I'm checking my chat just to see if anyone, microphone shy or anything, needs a hand. Is F5 working? Great. So look, I got to warn you, we're going to be using F5 and F6, and they're very different. So I just want to repeat about F5. F5 is filler. Every time I have a vacation, I wish I could F5 it. It's never long enough. Every time I get paid, I want to F5 that. But anyway, another subject. We're F5ing time, right? So I'd like you to get that playhead. That's this blue bar here back to the beginning. And you could just drag it over to the left and keep going. We're ready for some actual animation. Now, I don't remember how much detail you remember from the last round of this. But what we did was we started with the simplest point of view of what animation is, and we got increasingly complex. So a simple point of view is a word shows up, but not the others. And then a little bit later, the next block shows up. And then the next shows up. So it's a time-based way of looking at it. So this is what I'd like to do. I'd like you to look at your top layer, which says here's 2, right? And notice that its black dot, that's called a keyframe, is in frame 1. That's the beginning of the movie. That's fine, let's leave it there. I'd like you to go beneath it though, on the layer called piece, and click that black keyframe. And that's another way of selecting the word. I don't want that to start in frame 1. I want it to wait. And I think I'd like it to wait for just 10 frames. So let's press on that keyframe and drag it over to frame 10. Now I'm going to do that on the third one. So if anyone missed it, it's the same step though. I'm going to the last layer. I'm clicking that keyframe because I don't want that to start in frame 1. I want it to start later. So I'm going to drag it over, not to 10. I'm taking this one all the way to 20. So the idea is I'm scattering timing. So it starts with here's 2, peace in 2021. I'm going to bring this back to the beginning. Now look, since we did this before, right, I want to say something about a step more advanced. That was kind of quick, wasn't it? I mean, I just played it. I don't know if you played yours. It's just too quick to really matter. You know, I could see doing that if I'm doing the lyrics to a rap song and the guy's like rapping at a mile per minute, you know, which by the way, I've done, you know, and it's a lot of work. It's all over the internet, that stuff. So I'll choose my pace based on the project. How would we slow this down? What I'd like you to do is find the keyframe for peace. Click it and press it, drag it over to 15. I don't want to go by 10s. I want to go by 15s. So I'm leaving the first phrase where it is in frame 1. I'm going to peace and I dragged it over to frame 15. And I'm going to go to the third one down and I want to drag that one over to 30. So everything's going to take 50% longer on screen, and I like that a little better. Of course, we're going to make this a little bit more interesting. But I do want to point out, though, if there were more words and more lines, this would actually be kind of interesting. I can make it more interesting by using more color, really rethinking fonts, but we're going to do better, right? So if you have yours now paced, right, scattered timing, right? First comes first, then the next, we're ready to do something a little bit more interesting. I want to focus on some slides. So right now, boom, 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 but maybe it should be like that. Woo, woo, like my sound effects. Woo. That stands for slide. Woo. All right, any case, let's do it. Now this takes more thought, right? The rest was pretty mechanical. All right, I want you to join me on this. Let's start on the top. So frame 1 has a word, right? And that word is just sitting there. But I'd like it to take 10 frames to slide. So this is what you got to do. I want you to go, let me just think this through for a minute. You know what? I think I want to turn on classic tweening for all 3 objects before we choose what to do with those objects. So I'm going to make that clearer. I'd like you to go to frame 1 of your top layer where the word here's 2 lives, but we're talking about the timeline. Click it in the timeline. And then I want you to right click, right? If you have that kind of mouse, or hold down Control and click on that keyframe. So you're not clicking on stage. You're clicking on the first black dot, the first keyframe of your top layer, because you want to choose this. Create classic tween. When you do that, you'll see a bunch of little dots in a kind of purplish bar. I'd like you to go to the lower layer. Notice that its first keyframe is empty, so we don't care about that one. You want to go to the first black one. That means there's art there. Do the same thing. Either right click or control click and say create classic tween. I'm going to ask you to find the keyframe that matters in your last layer. Right? So the hollow ones are, you know, some people call them white, but they're actually called hollow. They don't matter. They're just a rest. So you want to find the first black one. That's probably in frame 30. Click it. Then either right click it or control click it and choose create classic tween. So what does that even mean? When you see those bars show up with the color, it knows you're ready for actual motion. You know, we could change locations of objects and it's going to create this object here. And now I moved it later in the timeline here and it's going to travel. It's not going to reappear. Let's see what that actually means. If you've got your classic tween, on all your layers, I want you to go back to the first frame of the first layer. We're just talking about this phrase, here's 2. I'd like you on the same layer to go 10 frames down. And this time we're going to use the F6 key. Now the F6 key also controls my screen brightness. So I'm going to have to hold down my FN, my function key, and tap F6. Now when you do that, you should see a couple things happen. A second keyframe appeared. It's also black. It's an exact copy of the last keyframe. F5 just adds time, but it doesn't copy art. F6 copies art. So it's later in the timeline. So what you should be seeing is 2 black dots 10 frames apart with an arrow between them. This takes a moment to think through for a minute, right? The idea is the keyframe you just made, that one stays put. That's the finished location. If we back up to the earlier keyframe, that could start anywhere on the screen, right? And we know it's going to travel to where the new one is, so someone could read. Now, what I'm doing for a simple slide is this. I'd like for you to go back to that first keyframe and click it. And if you want a simple slide, you just drag it over a little bit. This keyframe has a new location, but the other one was anchored there at the original spot. So if you played it now, you got that slide. Here's 2. So basically what we're saying is we created a 10 frame segment where both ends have different locations. The second one we want to protect. I do want to say for the record though, I could have put this one anywhere. It just would have felt kind of random. So when you get to the final project, this choice is yours, right? You can have as much fun with it as you want. So I don't really like this one where it is. I'm going to have to fix that. So here's my slide. I'm going to go to the word piece and have it also slide from the opposite side. So when you're ready, bring your playhead back to the beginning, just to reorient yourself. Then drag it over until you see the word piece. So the way I have it, the word piece appears on frame 15. That's the beginning of its little life. I want it to take 10 frames to do a slide of its own. So I'm going to go 10 frames over. That's frame 25. I'm on the piece layer. And it's all about F6. I'm holding my function key, tapping F6. The idea is every motion has at least 2 key moments. If my hand's going to slide across the zoom box, this is key moment 1, right? And somewhere down the road, this is key moment 2. And the tween's going to take care of it. But I could change either end. I just have to think it through. The way we're doing it, it's the first one that actually gets moved. So if you've got 2 keyframes for piece, back up to the first one and relocate the word. I'm going to have mine come from the right. So it's going to go from here, slide over to the original design. It's the first keyframe that I chose when I moved my artwork over. So I've got this. Not bad. Okay. If all's going well, please save again. Command S or File menu save. And we want to deal with in 2021. So you look at your lower layer. You could click that first black dot you see, that first keyframe, the first filled keyframe, I should say, just to see where we're at. And now I want to say to you, do I want them all to do the same kind of slide? I don't know. I think I might want the word in 2021 to come from somewhere else. And listen, I have to be frank. This almost always works. This almost always works. This almost always feels weird. And there's a few reasons. Text imitates us. We either stand or we lie down. So text lies down for sentences and it stands up in columns, but it never has a reason to be diagonal. So those rules could break, but you have to ask yourself, does it really work? You know, in the gut, you know, technically it could work, but artistically? So, I mean, there's crafty things like we're doing this, you know, swiveling like on an elbow. That's a little bit harder, right? So right now I want to stick with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the same 10 frame interval. So the word in 2021, that block has 10 frames to work with. So here's where it starts in frame 30. I want to go 10 frames further. And I'm going to F6 again. By now, we all know whether you need your FN key or not. So here's the 2 keyframes. The trick is definitely not to move the artwork in the second one. You know, a person won't be able to read it. You want to go back to the first keyframe. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to back up a little so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take this first keyframe. I'm going to use it to move this artwork down. And that's not all. I think I want some scale. One thing that always gets someone's attention is when something small gets big, right? And that's just human nature, you know, and I'll bet you anything our ancestors in the caves were very tuned in to things going from small to large, and you could see why they would be, right? And that's built in, and we use it for animation and for all kinds of ways to get someone's attention, even in video. So I'm going to take this with the transform tool, right? The black arrow isn't best for this. The free transform tool is. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to make this real small. So what's going to happen is it's going to get bigger as it goes into place. Does anyone want me to go over that last set of steps? Would you let me know?
Yes.
Don't be embarrassed. I got a yes. All right, I'm going to do it. All right. So I'm just going to Command Z a bunch of times till I only see the black dot down here. Command Z. I love Command Z. All right, so here I'm back. There's only one keyframe. I turned the classic tween on much earlier. I'm deciding that whatever it's going to do, I want it to happen in 10 frames. So I'm going 10 frames down, roughly, and I'm going to use my F6 trick to copy the artwork there. So every time I see a black dot on the same layer, it's a copy of the artwork. This copy is already in the right position. That's the conclusion. The one before it is the one I want to move. So what I chose to do was move it down and make it smaller. And I'm holding Shift down just to make sure that I don't distort it. If I play from here, you're going to see very quickly what that word does. And here's the whole animation. Now we still have more to do. I would like you to save what you have. File menu save, Command S. And let's get a quick peek at something. I want to mention something to you. We use Swifts.swf often as previews. A handful of years ago, it was the #1 file format for animation and gaming because it's a kind of file that you could program as well as make things move. But it was the Swift file that bugged everybody out. When Apple stopped using this thing called Flash Player and then Android did the same, it was all because evil people were abusing the Swift file, SWF. But when you make your own Swift, there's nothing to worry about. So we often use it as a preview. Now, the Swift file happens to be one of the file types that I'll accept for the final. So it's good to know how to make it. You save your file that you're working on. This is an FLA. And then when you want to either export the Swift or just have a look at the Swift, simply do this. On a Mac, hold down Command and tap Return. On Windows, hold down Control and tap Enter. So I held down Command and tapped Return to do this on my Mac. Command, Return. Windows is Control, Enter. And it's looping by default. I have a question for you, but first I want to say something. How long does mine pause before it repeats? I don't think it pauses very long. So what's going on here is the animation finishes here, looks like, frame 40. But earlier on, I chose to make it 3 seconds long. So that basically means the whole rest of the timeline is just a long pause. And if I'm going to let it loop, I really like that pause. Gives a person a chance to read. I'm kind of curious for people on Windows, is making this Swift, does it work? It does? Anyone not able to make the Swift? Because I had a semester where a bunch of the people on Windows, they just couldn't make the Swift. So we had to just use other output types. All right, looks like we're okay. And again, never be shy if there's trouble. You know, I'll do my best to fix it. All right. Let's see what else we can do. Listen, folks, let's stop for a minute. You know, as I said to you on Thursday, we're going to actually start, you know, the final project together. And you're not going to have to follow every single step I recommend. Some of you are going to be like, no, I don't want it to slide. I just want it to scale up. And someone else is going to be like, I don't want it to fade in. I want it to change color. So let's do a couple of fades. And I think I'm going to throw in a color change because we haven't done that yet. All right, let's get the playhead back to the beginning. And just, you know, you could grab the playhead to remind yourself what that first layer is doing. It's just sliding over. But wouldn't it be cool if it started almost transparent and kind of faded in while it was sliding? So what we want to do is a fade in during the slide. So I want you to go to your top layer and select the first keyframe. Okay, note takers, for those of you who write notes, this is a good one. I'm going to look on the properties palette now, but I'm not going to see the feature I need, which is called color effects. And I'm going to show you why. Some of us are going to see it, some of us are not. So here's the properties palette, and I don't see color effects anywhere here. And this is why. When you choose artwork by clicking the keyframe, the program still thinks you're talking about timing. To work with transparency or color, you then have to click the artwork once. Then color effect shows up. So I want to repeat that. Find the keyframe, that's important, but then click the artwork one time only. You could only change anything to do with color in a keyframe. You can't do it in the middle of a tween. So you go to the keyframe first, click the artwork you want one time, and then you take a look over here. The properties palette then shows you color effects. And you have several choices. Let's start with alpha. Alpha 0 means invisible. You could take it up as high as you want, but then play your animation. So that one word fades in while it slides. I want to do the same thing to the word peace. So if you missed it, here's another chance. The way we laid it out, every word has 2 keyframes to do its job. And the trick is always to know, which one do I want? The early one, you know, the actor early in the scene, or the actor late in the scene. So we're talking about the early actor for the word peace. So I click the keyframe to find it, but again, I don't see color effects because I then have to click the artwork. So I'm recommending a 2-click road. Click the keyframe, then click the artwork once each. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to set alpha again, Alpha remembers the setting you used last time. So now my animation is going to look like this. All right, it's a little more subtle. So here's the gist of it. This artwork is set to alpha 21, very low alpha. The second keyframe has no alpha at all. I want to do some color with you, but I want to ask you, did the fade in work? I find this program really elegant myself. I really do. But it does have competition. You know, off the top of my head, I'd say the big three for 2D animation would also include another Adobe program called Adobe After Effects. Awesome program. That one's a little bit better at including live action video and that kind of thing. The other big one would be Toon Boom, which I've never used. Kind of pricey, but very popular. So they're the big three. All right. I want to show you how to change color. And the reason that I want to do that now is the steps are almost the same as alpha. So here you go. Let's go down to the lowest layer. And we already have a little slightly different behavior, right? We made it small. Most of us did anyway. The slide's coming from the bottom on mine. Now, if I wanted to change color, I want you to decide which end should be a different color. So I've got it blue here. Do I want it to end in blue? It's up to me. I've also got blue here. Do I want it to start blue? So the question's really up to you, right? I want you to pick which end you'd like to see in a different color. I'm actually going to break the pattern right now, and I'm going to change the second one. So I click the keyframe first. And as I've been saying, then I have to click the artwork once. And I'm going to go back to color effects. So you could do it on either keyframe. In a minute or two, you'll see the result. I'm choosing the second one. Then I click the artwork once to get to color effects, but this time we want tint. Now, tint is also really easy, especially if you ignore these three sliders, red, green, blue. The easier way to use it is to use this color chip that shows up on the properties palette. So you chose tint from the same menu that you could have chosen alpha. So I'm going to click this chip, and I'm going to check out some colors just by mousing over them, kind of like that one. And there's so many good choices. Then, if you feel like it's just too much of that color, use the top slider. This will reduce the amount of tint. So if you go down to 0, that's the original color. All the way up, it's completely the new color. And if you back up, you'll see one frame has one color, and it tweens color until it arrives at the new color. How's Tint treating you? Tint is awesome. You know, I want to say a couple quick things about Tint in general. Like one, it gets people's attention, and please hear me out, because most people believe that things have a static color, but they don't. So you go to your drawer, you're like, oh, I'm going to wear my red shirt today, right? And yes, it's a red shirt for convenience, but see what it looks like when you walk into a room that's all yellow. The chances of that shirt not turning orange is very slim, because yellow and red make orange, and a room that's painted yellow all over, like the ceiling and the floor, is going to be highly reflective. So you need tint for things to be believable. If Superman jumps into the sky and starts flying around in the clear blue sky, he's going to be bluish by comparison. You know, he looks different in the phone booth or wherever he changes in 2021, because he's probably got a cell phone. Anyway. All right. Could everybody save what you have? Save it. I'd like you to do a preview. So I'm going to do Command Return. And I'm going to close that SWIF up. I do want to change the timing just a little bit, and then I want to ask you if you have a wish list of anything you'd like to see happen, and we'll see if we can do it, right? So first off, about the timing, if you're going to let an animation loop, so GIFs can loop, SWIFs loop. GIF is more important because it's popular on the internet. Videos don't usually loop, right? So if you want this to loop, we should probably add a little longer pause so the person could chill with it, read it, then see it again. So to add a pause, I'd like you to bring your playhead to the end of your timeline. So that's in the 70s right now. If it's still where you left it, you're at 3 seconds. Well, F5 was filler. I'm going to add a second. So that's this, it's 1 Mississippi, not very long. I'm tempted to add more, right? But right now I'm going to add a second. So I'm going to go all the way 1 second further out, 24 frames further. It even says 4 seconds. And I'm going to use my F5 trick. I think a lot of us need the function key, but it's still all about F5. F5 is just filler. I'm not adding any new artwork. I'm going to save it. I'm going to preview it. That was a pretty nice pause. Enough time to easily read it before it played again. If you want longer, I'm with it. Just F5 each layer. Okay. Does anybody see something in their head they'd like to see if it's possible, if we could do it now? Anybody have something they'd like? Next time I see you, I think I want to bring in a photo. Maybe a cool background or something. But I didn't prepare one. I like to have one ready for everybody when I do that kind of thing. So I think I'll do that next class. This is what I'd like to do. We did something similar last time, so I think it'll help you imagine more. I'd like a box to show up around the word piece. And it's harder than what we did because the timing is now very sensitive. We did all these things. At what point should the box even show up, right? So here's my opinion about that. So I'm bringing it back. When the playhead moves, here's 2. I don't want to see a box on screen yet. And even if I had the box show up now, it's going to be very distracting because that's going to happen before the last actor shows up. So I actually think after In 2021 finishes its routine, maybe this is the good time for the box to start to show up behind the word piece. If you'd like to join me on this last step, here's what you need to do. I'd like you to find the very last keyframe, the one we were just working on actually, for In 2021. And just notice the frame number. I'm on frame 40. All right, I need a new layer. So if you come back to the timeline's left, you'll see there's a plus sign, a folder, and a trash can. I'd like you to click the plus sign once. Now, it has a layer number on it. Could you double click its name and just call it box? You made a new layer, you renamed it. It would be best if that layer is right under the piece layer. So if yours is in a different place, like up here, press on it and drag it under the piece layer. Now here's the problem. I want to draw that box in frame 40, but there's no keyframe there. So I want to repeat something. You can only draw if there's a blank keyframe for you to draw in. It wasn't a trouble for us because all the layers come with one blank keyframe in frame 1. And that's where we started. This is the first time when we actually want to start way downriver. So those of you who are going to use the biggest phrase for the final, multiple sentences, you're going to need to create your own blank keyframe if a sentence shows up in frame 100. So I want you to go on your new layer to frame 40 or whatever layer matches the arrival of this. So in other words, the animation's done in frame 40 on mine. So I'm going to go on my new layer and highlight that frame. How do I get a blank keyframe though? You choose the frame, Then you either right click or control click to insert a blank keyframe. So now my timing is going to be protected. Here it is, frame 40, right? In a brand new layer called box. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a box, the rectangle tool. I'm going to pick a fill from the properties palette or from the bottom of the toolbar. It's the same. Now I'm going to take a good guess at color. Hopefully a good guess. And I'm going to put my box down. I don't like the color. I don't like the black stroke. So before I go any further, I want to fix a couple things. To change the color, I'll take my black arrow and click on it. I don't need tint because this is not a symbol yet, right? The symbols are freeze dried. The only way to change color is with the tint feature. But this is a raw shape, what we call an editable object. So I just simply click on it. I'm going to go find myself a better color. Maybe I'll borrow one of these. Nah. I know I'm like crazy picky with this stuff. If you have a stroke on it that you don't like, use your black arrow to carefully double click right on the stroke and press delete. Now, right now, my animation is going to have a sudden box, which really is not so bad. Maybe I should leave it. But if I want to tween it in any way, it gives me a last chance to go over the steps for tweening. Just like text, I'm going to make it a symbol first, right? And then I'm going to have to do some fancy F6 stuff. So I'm going to click on that artwork. I either use my control key or I right click to convert to symbol. Do you remember how you did this with each block of text? This time I'm doing it with a drawing, a box. So I click it, then I do convert to symbol, graphic. I'm going to call it box here also. I could even check my library. There it is, just like the other graphic symbols. All right, now I'm ready to tween. So I'm going to go back to the keyframe in the timeline. In all cases, you find the first keyframe with the art and then tell it, please tween from here. So let's go to that keyframe, right? So that's in your layers. Click it. And again, you either right click or control click. Create classic tween. And we're going to actually do something with that tween, of course, but I just want to mention, here's the simplest rule. Make the art, convert to symbol, turn on the tween. That's a healthy order. Draw it or type it. Make the art, whether it's a word or not. Convert it to a symbol, then turn on the tween. All right, so the tween's on. Now we got to decide what we want it to do. Should it slide over? Should it just fade in? You know, maybe it should just fade in without sliding at all. All right. To do any of those, though, we need two keyframes. I call them bookends. Should it be 15 frames apart again? Do you want it to be slower, faster? That's going to be up to you. Now, I've been doing everything at 15 frame intervals, so I'm going to do that again, but you could change that. Maybe you want it fast, 5 frames, you know, or slow. Whoa, very peaceful. I'm going to go with 15. So here's my first keyframe. I'm on frame 40. I'm going to go 15 frames further on the same layer. This is F6. Again, I need my FN key. I forgot there. So F6 is the one that copies the last keyframe. So this is here the way I want it to look when it's done. I could go back to this one, the earlier one, and make my choice. If I wanted to move, I'm going to drag it around the stage now. But if I wanted,
等一会儿下回再说。
is that a question for me? No? All right. All right. I'm going to click the first of the two keyframes. If all I wanted to do is alpha, I click the artwork once, go to the properties palette. Here's color effect. I'm going to choose alpha. So I just want to repeat, it's the earlier of the two frames that we want to change. If you just wanted to fade in, click it. Here's color effect. I'm going to go back to alpha and set it as low as you want. And that's going to produce this. I'm going to save mine and have a look. Kind of like that. I just want to mention in passing that I like the effect that box had so much that it's making the stage feel a little hungry to me. I'd be tempted to just put a stripe at the top and a stripe at the bottom for no reason other than a more balanced graphic design, or at least a fuller graphic design.
你看烤箱里能吃咬的吗？
I'm going to assume that was a great agreement with me. But anyway, this could go on forever, as you can see. So what I've chose to do today, like I did last time, is break down a few of the main elements that motion graphic artists are likely to make use of. Let me stop for a minute. The term animator is abused, and the general public thinks of all animators as animators. So it doesn't matter if you're doing Bugs Bunny or somebody's logo, or if you're making the planet Earth turn before the weatherman comes on the news. But to us in the field, those are very different. Bugs Bunny's animator is a character animator, right? And on that team, there might be just a background artist. This is distinctly motion graphics. Text is considered motion graphics, as well as a box that's just moving. Motion graphics. And motion graphic artists, this is what they care about. Movement, timing, transparency, fades, right? Tints, right? And sometimes rotation. I don't think rotation would have helped us today. Does anybody have any last question for me? So listen, this is what I want to say to everybody. You know, save it a last time if you think you might want to study it later. We're going to actually start the final next time I see you, and we'll figure out how long we need for it. You know, I've reserved 1 or 2 classes already. It's my usual way. I usually do 2 classes on that. You still have time at home. So some of you are going to come, we'll see how it goes. That would leave us 1 extra class where I could do some wrap up stuff with you, and I have a lot of interesting things to share. That's the current plan. Folks, I've taken attendance. I do want to say a quick word before you go. Check Blackboard today. I do want to tell you the grades in the class are very high. Let's be blunt. I didn't give a lot of homework, you know, so people who were driven, who had no obstacles, got really high grades, you know, by and large. Some people had obstacles out of reach, computer problems mostly, right? Which delayed them, you know, or life, you know. We've had our share of life these days, you know. So check though. If you owe me anything, you know, missing 1 homework is a really big deal. Can you pass? You can if you get really high grades on the other 3. You can't pass without the midterm at all, you know. So please take action. Reach out if you need to. Folks, I'm going to see you all next class. Chris and I had to go over something. Otherwise, I'd invite everybody to hang out. But since no one has any questions at all, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Chris, he just left. Oh, there you go. Don't go anywhere, man. If you need 2 minutes, go take it now. But we're going to start in 2 minutes, you and I.
Okay.
So everybody else, I'll see you all. Since there are no questions, I'll see you all Thursday. We're gonna
Take
do
care,
one-
Professor. Then.
My
Bye,
pleasure.
Professor.
Take care,
next
Professor.
class.
Professor.
so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Truly.
Bye bye, Professor.
Bye.